You sign autographs?
No, I don't sign autographs.
Paul Newman wasn't just another Hollywood legend. He was a storm wrapped in cool confidence, a rebel with a grin that could melt steel, and a perfectionist who couldn't stop digging for truth in every line, every look, every frame. Behind those famous blue eyes wasn't just an actor. There was a man addicted to the art of storytelling, obsessed with learning, studying, and mastering the game of cinema. Newman watched movies like a sculptor studying the finest marble. He searched for honesty, courage, and that spark that made something feel real. The films he loved most say everything about who he was, what thrilled him, what challenged him, and what made him push harder every single time. So today, we're diving into Paul Newman's 7 favorite films, a wild mix of classics he starred in and others he simply couldn't get enough of. Each pick gives us a glimpse into Newman's heart, what stirred him, what shaped his beliefs, and what he thought true filmmaking should be all about. We'll be digging into his own quotes, diary notes, and stories from the people who knew him best. And don't worry, we'll throw in some curiosity questions along the way, because Newman loved debate, passion, and bold opinions that sparked real talk. Ready to step into the mind of a legend? Let's roll into the countdown, starting with number 7. Number 7, Slapshot, 1977. Picture Paul Newman in the middle of ice-cold chaos, hockey fights, flying fists, and locker room madness everywhere. Slapshot wasn't just another raunchy sports comedy. It was a blast of pure energy that Newman adored more than anyone expected. When someone once asked which of his movies he enjoyed making the most, he didn't pick one of his Oscar darlings or a dramatic classic. He picked this one. Why? Because it gave him freedom. It let him cut loose, laugh, and just play. It reminded him that movies could be wild, raw, and ridiculously fun. In Slapshot, Newman becomes Reggie Dunlop, a sharp-tongued, smooth-talking player coach running a crumbling minor league hockey team. Reggie's desperate, funny, and full of wild charm. When the team's about to fall apart, he brings in the infamous Hanson brothers. 3 goggle-wearing maniacs who turn every match into a full-blown circus of smashed glass and flying elbows. Suddenly, the losing streak turns into an unforgettable spectacle that fans can't get enough of. And Newman, he lived for it. He once admitted he had more fun shooting Slapshot than any other movie he ever made. Afterward, he even joked that his vocabulary had changed forever, saying his language became right out of the locker room. And the best part? Newman wasn't pretending to have fun. He was having fun. Behind the camera, he hung out with real hockey players, picking up their moves and soaking in their toughness. He loved their grit, their chaos, and their brotherhood, that wild, unfiltered energy that made Slapshot unforgettable. Paul Newman wasn't chasing trophies this time. He was chasing fun. He was back to performing for the pure thrill of it, without the heavy pressure of awards or critics hanging over him. Fans felt that energy, and it showed. Slapshot turned into a cult classic, especially among athletes who loved how it nailed the wild chaos of sports life. Exaggerated, sure, but packed with heart. And that grin, that signature Newman grin, carried the whole movie. It was the smile of a man who knew the story was ridiculous and loved it anyway. Most stars cling to the movies that earn prestige and respect. But Newman, he treasured the ones that reminded him what joy felt like. Slapshot was loud, messy, and totally unfiltered, but it made him laugh, it made him free. Even years later, he stood by it as his favorite of all his films. When you see Newman as Reggie Dunlop, what do you really see? The Hollywood icon or the playful troublemaker hiding underneath, thrilled to break every rule? And what about you? What's your favorite outrageous moment from this wild hockey ride? Number 6, Cool Hand Luke, 1967. Cool Hand Luke wasn't just another role for Paul Newman. It was a full-blown revelation. Before a single camera even rolled, Newman felt something electric in that script. He said it was one of the best he'd ever read, and he truly believed, give an actor a great script and he'll move the world. That's exactly what happened with Luke Jackson, the defiant prisoner who refuses to bow down to anyone. Luke isn't loud or showy. He's quiet, stubborn, and heartbreakingly human. He's not out here leading revolutions or making big speeches. He just won't break. Newman was fascinated by that kind of rebellion. Silent, steady, and deeply personal. Luke might act like he doesn't care, but that's what makes him dangerous to the system. Newman once explained that Luke can't beat the system, but he still laughs at it. And that contradiction fascinated him. Luke's real strength came from his weakness, his humor was his armor, and his smile hid his pain. Newman connected with those layers instantly, like he understood Luke's soul without needing words. Every scene, from the brutal egg-eating challenge to his desperate escapes and those unforgettable stare-downs with authority, wasn't about showing off. For Newman, each moment peeled back another piece of Luke's bruised heart. When Luke pushes through pain, it's not arrogance, it's survival. That smirk after punishment, it's a man daring the world to break him, and failing to do so. Newman built Luke into something bigger than a man. He turned him into a symbol of quiet resistance. No speeches, no grandstanding, just stillness and those piercing eyes that said everything. Director Stuart Rosenberg gave Newman the space to explore every crack in Luke's spirit, and what came out was one of the most powerful performances of his entire career. It earned him an Oscar nomination and cemented Luke Jackson as one of the ultimate anti-authority icons of the 1960s. Audiences felt that fire right away. Luke became the voice for anyone who'd ever been trapped, pushed down, or boxed in by rules that refused to bend. Luke wasn't unbreakable. He was breaking the whole time and just refused to let the world see it. That quiet pain, that hidden struggle, was exactly what Newman found so powerful. Cool Hand Luke didn't just define a movie, it helped define Newman's entire legacy. Luke's calm defiance, dry humor, and stubborn resilience turned into some of the most unforgettable images in American cinema. And for Newman, it all came back to the writing, the foundation that let him dig beneath the charm and pull out something real and raw. So what do you see when you look at Luke? Is he a rebel with nothing to lose, or a man quietly drowning behind that grin? And tell me, which scene made you realize just how brilliant Newman truly was? Number 5. Raging Bull, 1980. Paul Newman never threw a punch in Raging Bull, but make no mistake, this film hit him hard. When Newman sat down to watch Martin Scorsese's brutal masterpiece about boxer Jake LaMotta, he wasn't just impressed, he was shaken. The film was raw, violent, and unapologetically human, exactly the kind of fearless art Newman craved. It wasn't safe, it wasn't pretty, it was alive. He loved it so much that he actually wrote Scorsese a personal letter, praising the film with genuine admiration. That single act of respect would end up reshaping the next big chapter of Newman's career. Raging Bull is a storm of jealousy, rage, heartbreak, and shattered redemption. Robert De Niro disappears into LaMotta, changing his body, his voice, even his soul to live inside the man's chaos. Every black and white frame feels like a confession. Every punch lands like a moral earthquake. Scorsese shoots the fights like battles for the human spirit, not just boxing matches, but moments of emotional collapse and rebirth. And in all that turmoil, Newman saw something sacred, an artist risking everything to touch the truth. He admired De Niro's total transformation, Scorsese's furious camera work, and the brutal honesty that refused to clean up LaMotta's flaws. Newman understood that this wasn't just a story about a fighter. It was about a man losing pieces of himself one swing at a time. That kind of emotional exposure spoke straight to Newman's soul. He believed the best performances came from vulnerability, not vanity. Now here's where it gets real interesting. Raging Bull didn't just inspire Newman emotionally, it changed his career direction. Watching that film lit a spark in him that led to one of his boldest moves yet. He reached out to Scorsese to direct a sequel to The Hustler. Newman was convinced Scorsese could bring that same electric energy, that same visual fire into the smoky pool halls of The Color of Money. And guess what? He was right. Newman later said that watching Raging Bull made him realize Scorsese was the only director who could revive Fast Eddie Felson. Decades after The Hustler, their collaboration exploded on screen, and this time, it finally earned Newman the Academy Award that had slipped through his fingers for years. He never forgot where that spark came from. It started the moment he saw Raging Bull. For Newman, that movie was everything cinema was supposed to be: risky, emotional, intimate, and fearless. He didn't love it as a movie star showing off his peers. He loved it as a lifelong student of film, watching art pushed to its limits. Number 4, HUD, 1963. HUD gave Paul Newman something Hollywood rarely handed him: the chance to play a man with no hidden goodness at all. HUD Bannon wasn't noble, brave, or secretly misunderstood. He was handsome, magnetic, and completely rotten, and Newman absolutely relished that challenge. He once said people fell for Hud because he had all the external graces. He looked good, he moved well, he drank well, he charmed everyone. But inside, he was rotten to the core. That contradiction made the role impossible to resist. In the film, Hud goes head-to-head with his upright father and corrupts his young nephew without a second thought. He's selfish, reckless, and cruel in that casual, dangerous way that makes you hate him 1 second and watch him the next. And that was the genius of it. The camera couldn't look away, and neither could audiences. Newman knew exactly why people were drawn to Hud. It wasn't because they admired his morals. It was because they envied his swagger, his freedom, his refusal to pretend. Newman found that mix both fascinating and a little frightening. What does it say about us when we cheer for someone we know we shouldn't trust? He admitted he didn't even like Hud as a person, but as an actor, he was hooked. Hud gave him the freedom to step out of Hollywood's perfect leading man box and dive headfirst into something darker. It let him play with ego, arrogance, and charm turned into manipulation, and Newman loved every second of that danger. That performance became one of the biggest turning points in his career. Critics were stunned, and Newman walked away with an Oscar nomination that cemented his power as a risk-taker. Hud helped reshape American cinema, opening the door for the rise of the anti-hero, those complicated magnetic characters we can't stop watching, even when they do terrible things. Newman didn't just act in that shift, he led it. Behind the scenes, Newman did his homework. He studied real cowboys and ranchers, observing how they carried themselves, loose, confident, always a little predatory. He wanted Hud to walk into every room like he owned it, even when he absolutely didn't deserve to. That body language, the easy swagger, the cool arrogance, became one of the movie's trademarks. But the reaction that really surprised Newman came from the fans. They loved Hud. Not for his morals, but for his attitude. People admired the bad guy. Newman shook his head at that, but he got it. Charm is dangerous, looks are powerful, and when a story tells the truth about human flaws, it pulls people in, no matter how dark it gets. In the end, Hud proved something huge. Great storytelling doesn't need heroes in shining armor, it just needs truth. So when you watch Hud, do you find yourself drawn to him despite everything wrong with him? And what does that say about how charisma can completely outshine character? Number 3, Rachel, 1968. For Paul Newman, Rachel wasn't just another gig. It was a turning point, a labor of love, and one of the most personal projects of his life. This was the first movie he ever directed, and at its heart was the woman he adored and trusted more than anyone, his wife, Joanne Woodward. The story follows a lonely school teacher quietly struggling with regret, desire, and the aching hope for something more. Newman believed in this film so deeply that he stepped behind the camera for the very first time to bring it to life himself. He poured everything he had into capturing the emotional honesty of one woman's journey toward rediscovering herself. Newman once said, "One of the best movie experiences I ever had was working with Joanne on Rachel, and you can feel that devotion in every frame, every close-up, every quiet pause, every moment that dared to show the beauty and pain of an ordinary life." That single line about Rachel summed up everything. It wasn't about box office numbers or chasing trophies. It was about creation, collaboration, and honoring a character Newman found beautiful because of her vulnerability. The movie needed tenderness, honesty, and a director brave enough to let silence do the talking, and that's exactly what Newman did. He built Rachel around quiet emotions, those small, barely noticeable shifts that most Hollywood movies back then didn't even bother to explore. He trusted Joanne Woodward completely, guiding her with care, but never controlling her performance. The result? A raw, deeply human portrayal that earned Woodward both an Oscar nomination and a Golden Globe win. For Newman, this wasn't just about helping his wife shine, it was about challenging himself as an artist. Directing forced him to rethink everything he knew about storytelling. He stripped each scene down to its emotional core. No flashy tricks, no unnecessary noise, just truth. Newman once described his goal perfectly. He wanted the film to feel like a whisper that still reached your soul. And critics heard that whisper loud and clear. Rachel scored a nomination for Best Picture, and Newman walked away with a Golden Globe for directing. Overnight, people realized Paul Newman wasn't just a movie star. He was a filmmaker with real vision. But behind the awards and applause, Newman's biggest pride came from something far more personal. Rachel, Rachel allowed him to showcase Joanne Woodward the way he always believed she deserved to be seen. Brave, broken, and absolutely radiant. Their artistic connection deepened like never before. For Newman, that mattered more than any headline or trophy could. He often said he didn't care for flash. He cared for truth, and this film delivered it quietly, honestly, and without compromise. So, have you ever seen Woodward's performance in Rachel, Rachel? Do you think Newman pulled off his goal, creating a film that feels real, human, and deeply personal? And how do you think this kind of subtle, emotional storytelling stacks up against his louder, more explosive hits? Number 2, The Verdict, 1982. When The Verdict came along, Paul Newman was in his late 50s, a time when most actors start to slow down, but not him. Instead, he came roaring back with one of the most powerful performances of his entire career. As Frank Galvin, a washed-up lawyer drowning in whiskey and regret, Newman showed audiences something they hadn't seen before: vulnerability with zero glamour. Director Sidney Lumet said it best: this was the moment Newman finally grasped the value of self-revelation. In other words, Newman stopped performing and started exposing himself. Frank Galvin isn't your typical courtroom hero. He's been chewed up by life, left behind by success, and given one final shot at redemption. A medical malpractice case that could either save or destroy what's left of his dignity. At first, he just wants the money, then he wants justice. But by the end, all he truly wants is self-respect, not from others, but from himself. Newman connected deeply with that inner battle. He understood what it meant to fight for a second chance, not to prove anything to the world, but to reclaim your own sense of worth. He prepared obsessively for the role, turning down every other offer so nothing would dilute his focus on Frank Galvin. Friends said he studied every emotional scar of the character until it felt lived in, not acted. When he finally watched the finished film, Newman was stunned, not out of arrogance, but out of sheer relief. He had taken a huge artistic gamble, laying himself bare for the first time in decades, and it worked. Lumet's direction matched Newman's honesty perfectly. Slow camera moves, long takes, and quiet moments that made you sit with Galvin's shame, his doubt, and his fragile hope. It wasn't flashy courtroom drama. It was raw humanity, stripped of everything except truth. Frank's regrets ran deep, and Newman thrived in that space of pain and truth. No charm, no tricks, no Hollywood shine, just raw emotion stripped bare for everyone to see. Critics couldn't stop praising him. He earned yet another Oscar nomination, and many believed this should have been the one that finally sealed his win. But for Newman, the real victory wasn't about gold statues. It was what happened inside him. The verdict proved that his craft wasn't fading. It was evolving. He wasn't leaning on star power anymore. He was peeling back every layer, searching for something honest and universal. That emotional breakthrough changed everything. It led him straight to The Color of Money, where he finally won his long-awaited Oscar. But in Newman's heart, The Verdict was the film that cracked him open. It was the one where he found the courage to be unguarded. So when you watch Frank Galvin, do you see that breakthrough? Can you feel Newman's vulnerability cutting through the screen? Could this be his greatest dramatic performance ever? Number 1. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969. If there's one film that truly captures Paul Newman's spirit, his humor, warmth, and unstoppable spark, it's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. This wasn't just another role for him. This was joy on screen. It was friendship, adventure, and lightning in a bottle. And Newman cherished every second of it. He played Butch Cassidy as the ultimate charming outlaw. Slick, clever, and quick, with a smile that could talk anyone out of trouble. But what made the movie legendary wasn't just Newman's magnetic energy. It was the chemistry. Paul Newman and Robert Redford created one of the greatest duos in movie history, built on teasing, trust, and pure, contagious fun. Redford later said his strongest memory from filming wasn't the stunts or the fame. It was the sheer fun that Paul and I had working together, calling Newman generous, mischievous, and the perfect partner on screen. That kind of bond doesn't fade. It glows in every scene. You can feel it. The laughter, the banter, the unspoken rhythm between them that made every moment come alive. Newman loved Butch Cassidy because it let him play. It let him improvise, relax, and share the spotlight instead of carrying the whole movie on his back. It reminded him why he fell in love with acting in the first place. Not for the fame, but for the connection. And off-screen, that connection turned into a real friendship that lasted decades. Newman and Redford gave each other endless grief, cracking jokes, pulling pranks, and firing back without mercy. But beneath all the teasing, there was real loyalty. They became icons of cool together. But Butch Cassidy wasn't just fun, it meant something deeper for Newman. The movie's spirit stayed with him for life. Years later, when he created his nonprofit camp for children with serious illnesses, he named it the Hole in the Wall Gang, directly after Butch's band of outlaws. That's how much this film was a part of him. And get this, the famous bicycle from the "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head" scene, Newman kept it in his garage for years. It wasn't just a prop, it was a reminder of one of the happiest times in his career. Professionally, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was a game changer. It turned Newman into a global superstar and completely redefined what a buddy movie could be. It showed that friendship, charm, and vulnerability could be just as gripping as any gunfight. But emotionally, it was the film that brought Newman back to joy. It reminded him of the laughter, the freedom, and the camaraderie that made acting feel like play again. The movie may end in a blaze of bullets, but Newman never saw that ending as tragic. To him, it was about choosing courage over fear. About two friends who refused to surrender even when the odds were impossible. So, who would you choose? These 7 films don't just show Paul Newman's movie taste, they reveal the soul of the man himself. From rebellious anti-heroes to broken dreamers, from quiet, emotional stories to wild, unforgettable adventures, every film captures a different piece of who Newman truly was, both as an artist and as a human being. He lived for honesty in storytelling, for bravery in performance, and for the thrill of risk, even when the world wanted him to play it safe. Newman's favorite movies remind us that great cinema isn't about being flawless. It's about being real. It's about that connection between the screen and your heart, that spark that happens when emotion, craft, and pure humanity collide right in front of you. And Newman? He spent over 50 years chasing that spark with everything he had. Now it's your turn. Which one of Newman's favorites surprised you the most? Which of these films are you ready to re-watch or maybe experience for the very first time? Drop your thoughts down in the comments. Let's keep celebrating Paul Newman and the fire he brought to every frame of film he touched. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of one of Hollywood's coolest legends, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps us keep exploring the icons who shaped cinema forever. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.